Hello, everybody. Welcome to the presentation about the Ming Voyages. My name's Alan Paull, and in the next, hopefully under an hour, I'll be telling you a bit about the second Pocket Campaign Series game, designed by Dave Mortimer and myself. Before I go too much further, I just want to check. Can you hear me all right? Somebody say that they can hear me in the chat and then I'll know. Otherwise, I could be talking to the ether for a long time. Great, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Right, in this session, I'm going to give an overview of how to play the two-player version of the game. And I'll try to add some comments about why Dave Mortimer and I made some of the design decisions there. If you'd like to have a full playthrough tutorial on the Ming Voyages, Paul Grogan has done a couple of really good ones. One on the two-player version and a solo run through as well. So please do have a look at those. There are links to those videos on our virtual stand. So the Ming Voyages. Here's our Ming Voyages box, which is rather pretty, I think. It says at the bottom, a game of treasure and conquest for 1 or 2 players, because that's what it's about. And what you get, and I'll just give you a quick idea of what you get in terms of physical components. We're going to have a look at it on Tabletopia in a minute, but I thought having a look at the physical stuff can be helpful. So there is a board. It's a relatively small board. Here we go. For size, here is a pencil to compare it with. So you can see that's the kind of size of the board. You can't really see the detail, but you can see that when we get to Tabletopia. It folds into 2, fits in the box, and still using the pencil. Here are some cards. Well, one card anyway. Gives you an idea of the size of the cards. Now, and I'm having trouble with this because I'm not used to doing this kind of reflected, so bear with me. Here we go. These are the same size as the Cousins War cards, for those of you who've got that previous game. 105 by 75 millimeters, so they're actually nice and chunky. And for comparison, they are probably about 50% bigger than something like Magic the Gathering cards. So they're nice and big. Oh, and they have these nice reddish, very Chinese looking backs as well. Right, so you also get a couple of rule books. Here we have a couple of rule books. You get one for solo and one for 2-player, and on the back there is a quick reference. So once you've learnt the game and you know a bit about it, you can actually just look at the quick reference bits and keep that in front of you on your table. There are some wooden pieces. So we have traditional dice. Those are actually used for combat in this game, which is quite rare for me. And there are some printed wooden pieces. So we have I'll try and hold these up so you can see them a bit better. These are the printed junk pieces, which was part of the Kickstarter, and also printed settlement markers. Let's see if I can actually show that. The barbarian settlement markers. I'll explain what they all do. And there's a bunch of cubes as well. Oh, but also gold. Again, from Kickstarter, we have actual... Sorry about my bandaged arm, we'll get that out of the way. We have gold pieces, which is nice. Right, so that gives you an overview of the components. The printed wooden pieces and the gold were part of the stretch goals on the Kickstarter campaign. So thank you very much to those people who supported the Kickstarter, because that was actually, I think that was a big improvement on the game, having those printed bits. So let's, without further ado, have a look at the game in detail on Tabletopia. Now, I'm running this on Steam, so I'm hoping that this is going to be easier than the browser version of Tabletopia, which I used yesterday. So we'll bear with me on this and see if this works. So let's zoom in, because one of the great advantages of Tabletopia is that you can zoom in theoretically on the camera view. There we go. Look at that. Well, to me, that looks quite good. I hope it looks good to you guys too, so you can see the full glory of the board. Notice, of course, this is a this is cheating, because of course this is the artwork file, so there's no crease down the middle. But you know, there you go. And also the cubes are standard Tabletopia implemented cubes. Right, so what do we got here? We have the green cubes are Chinese troops. So they're called troops. And you get 12 of those as a limit. The white ones, who are the barbarians, are hordes. Because obviously you have hordes of barbarians, don't you? Although one cube can still be a horde in this game. You don't have to have masses, although you can actually have masses. Then there's gold. This is, this doesn't look exactly like the gold pieces we have in the game because we're using yellow cubes because they're standard. And you also have these junks. Right, let's explain what you're trying to do. So in the two-player game, one player will play the Ming Emperor, and the other player will play the Barbarian Overlord. So the Ming Emperor, and I'll just pan out a little bit. The Ming Emperor is trying to complete the 7 overseas voyages that the Chinese in the early 15th century did through the auspices of Admiral Zheng He. And we've got a sample. Well, there were 7 what they call treasure voyages that the Ming did, and these are a sample of the locations. An interesting little design point. They are theoretically supposed to be the kind of distance away from China itself. So Siam and Sumatra are closer, and then India's a bit further away. Ceylon's right down the bottom of India, and we've used the old-fashioned version of Sri Lanka, Ceylon. Arabia, Persian Gulf, East Africa get further and further away. So that's a little design feature. That's colour really, but it's quite a nice thing we thought of doing. So the Ming Emperor starts with a gold in China and a single junk in the South China Sea, and we'll also have another junk deployed to one of these voyages. They will already have done one voyage. The Ming will use the junks and their gold to attempt to complete more voyages during the game. I'll explain that in a minute. They will also have to use their troops, which they can recruit from stock into China, to try to defend themselves against the ravening hordes of barbarians who are coming in from the north. So they're having to balance completing the voyages against defending the borders of the empire. The Ming Emperor will get a major victory if they can complete all 7 voyages. So at any time, if they have 7 voyages, they win. On the other hand, we just switch the view around to the barbarian side. The barbarians, looking at it from this perspective, they have lots of hordes. They have up to 12 hordes. They come in here, and they're trying to take these 5 borderland areas. Now, you'll probably note that places like Sichuan and Liaodong and Shanxi are, those of you who know anything about Chinese geography, those are not actually borderland provinces of China now, because now China comes all the way out, all the way over here. But we're talking about the 14th century, and the Ming had effectively kicked out the Mongols from ruling most of China, and they were gradually, the Ming gradually reasserted their power over the other areas, which are currently on this map shown as barbarian homelands. But for this exercise, these border provinces are the ones which are under threat from the Eastern Mongols, Western Mongols, and the Manchus. The Chinese can't come into here, and the barbarians can't actually go into China proper. They can only attack the borderlands. So the barbarian guys are going to attempt to take these 5 provinces, borderlands. If at any point the barbarians control all of the 5 borderlands, they win. So they get a major victory. So for the Ming, it's the 7 voyages. For the barbarians, it's the 5 borderlands. If nobody achieves a major victory, then at the end of the game, which is twice through this deck of cards, at the end of the game, you look at how many borderlands have been conquered by the barbarians and how many voyages have been completed. The Ming's score, Ming Emperor's score, is number of completed voyages plus number of borderlands that they control, whereas the barbarian score is the number of uncompleted voyages and the number of borderlands that they control. If it's a tie, the barbarians win. So that's how that works. Now, this is an asymmetric game. One of the things that Dave and I wanted to do, and it was Dave's original idea, was to produce a game which is very similar to our Cousins War game, but have it as an asymmetric game. Where in the Cousins War, the Yorkists and Lancastrians are effectively operating in the same mechanics. There's the same size of hand. They're the same. There are pretty much the same actions and events that happen. So there's not so much of the flavour of the particular side you're on. In this game, we wanted to make it so that it's different playing as the Ming from playing as the barbarians. And the way we've done this is, well, as you can see at the start of this is a setup for the start of the game. And actually, before we do anything else, I'll roll a dice, because this junk, we need to determine where this junk starts. Let's do that. Get that out of the way. Right, so the Ming already have completed their voyage to India. So put that there. Yeah, so asymmetric. So what happens in a round is the following. The Ming will draw 2 cards, so they'll have a hand of 5. The Ming will play 1 card and do things, actions, I'll explain those later, which will leave them with 4. Then the barbarians, who start with 4 cards, will play 1 of their cards and do their actions, which means that then the Ming have 4 cards and the barbarians have 3 cards at the end of the round, and you then swap hands. So at the start of the new round, the barbarians will again start with 4, and the Ming will again start with 3, and then you start the whole process again. Now, of course, these will be concealed in your hand of cards. I'm just displaying these because, well, 2 reasons mainly. One is actually Tabletopia makes the cards quite small when you put them in a hand. You can't really see them, and also I want to be able to display the cards more easily so you can actually view things. So the implication of that asymmetric movement of cards around is that the Ming Emperor will always know what cards are in the barbarian's hand. Obviously, you do have to actually remember them, but you'll know what they've got. Whereas the Ming Emperor will always pick 2 new cards from the deck, so the barbarian won't know exactly what the Ming Emperor has got in their hand. Now, why does that matter? Well, let's just go through what you do on your turn. I'll do that by illustrating from the Ming perspective to start with. So, as I said, we take 2 more cards at the start of the round, and with Tabletopia, quite nicely, you don't actually have to stick to the edge of the table, although it kind of feels a bit better to not ignore the gravity off the edge of the table. So let's put them a bit like this and flip them over. Right, and I'm going to be a bit pedantic and actually move that junk over there. That means I can move these cards to put them on the table properly. Right, so we've got the cards. Let's just have a look at a couple of the cards. So you can see how the cards work. There's two main types of card, really. There's this type. This is an action card which has got an event at the top here and an event at the bottom, both of which have got this scroll motif. This means that these actions refer to the Emperor. The barbarians don't get these actions. This 1 to 3 means that the Ming can use this action if they've completed from 1 to 3 voyages. Once they've completed 4 or more, they can use the bottom action instead. This here is the number of command points that the Ming Emperor, that the person using this card can use. And command points allow you to do lots of different things like moving, recruiting, attacking, etc. I'll go through those in a second. So the basic concept here when you play a card is you will either carry out one of these actions, or you will play the card for command points, or in this game you can actually reserve the card. So you can turn it over, flip it over, and that's your turn, and that card can then be used later on in the game during combat, and it gives you extra dice rolls. I'll explain that in a second. So that's this type of card. There are 3 kind of all Ming ones, and there's also 3 all barbarian cards like this. The other cards, which have got CP values, all those cards have got CP values of 1, 2, or 3 in ascending order of power. Let's look at another powerful card. So the key point here in these cards is that when you play this card on your turn, your opponent can use their action if it's on the card. So for example, if I play this card as the Ming, I can use the CP points, or I can use the action if I've completed this voyage. Restriction on the Ming is I can only use this action if I've completed this voyage. But the barbarian will be able to use their action here during my turn. So they get what is called a reaction. So in this case, if I play this card, I can use the 3 C points as the Ming Emperor. I can't use the action because I haven't completed voyage number 4, and either before or after my action, at the choice of the Ming Emperor, the barbarian can move troops in the borderlands. Now that's an advantage, because what the barbarian can do there, move 2 troops from a borderland to a single adjacent Ming control borderland, is you can just leave that completely vacant, in which case the barbarians can move in. So it's quite an advantage for the barbarians to be able to force the Ming troops to move around. Okay, so that's how that works. A comparison here. This is this is in the barbarian hand, but the 1 CP cards generally have no barbarian action. So in effect, these are free for the Ming Emperor to use. Right, so let's just go through the CPs. So I've said you can use the action, and for the Ming it's if you've got the right voyage number completed. So as you do more voyages, you get use of more of these actions. The CPs, you can do several things with CPs. Let's play a card as a sample. We're going to play the Earthquake card just as an example, and it's got 3 Ps, and the Ming Emperor is going to use the card for the CPs. We can either move troops, so we could literally move troops from one region to another. So we could move, well, it's only from one region to another region, so we could move 1 piece from there to there. Not an advantage at all. So we won't want to move. We can recruit more troops, so we can recruit 1 troop for each CP. So in this case, we could In this case, we could stick 3 more troops into China, ready for deploying up to the borderlands. We could use the 3 CPs to attack, but only into the borderlands. We control them all, so we can't do that. If we change it and we say maybe earlier the barbarians have managed to put something into Yunnan, take Yunnan, we could now use those 3 CPs to charge into Yunnan, and it's the number of CPs, which is the number of troops we can attack with. So we could decide to attack 1, 2, 3. That'd be perfectly viable. We'll leave them there and probably do that example later. The next thing we can do is we can build more junks. So we could build up to 3 junks and put those into the South China Sea. Let's just do that. So the barbarian's not getting a look in at the moment, but we're just going to stick 3 junks into that. Or we could use the CPs for gold. And guess what? It's number of gold equal number of CPs. So there's a bit of a pattern there. So it's fairly simple, as you can see, to understand those basic mechanics of using the CPs. And when we finished, we put that card into the discard pile, and then it would be the barbarian's turn. Okay, let's do an example combat. Now I'm going to set this up, because I'm not going to play the whole game here. Now, we'll presume that the barbarian player has reserved a card. Flip that one over. And we'll also presume that the Ming player has not reserved a card. And now we'll zip through as if we're using this card for an attack. And I'll come to Voyages in a second. So it's helpful to know what the attacks look like. So we can attack with a number, as I said, we can attack with a number of pieces equal to the CPs. So we've used a 3 CP card. So I've already moved those 3 in. So we've got a 3 against 1 attack. So the Chinese are feeling pretty confident. We outnumber the barbarians. That's always a good thing. But we've got no reserved cards. So the way the attacks work is as follows. You take the 3 dice. You always roll all 3 dice. And you roll the dice openly, so your opponent can see. It's not like the Cousins where you conceal them. And you're trying to get a high single or a double or preferably a triple. So I haven't actually fixed this, but I may have to change the dice if we don't get the right result. We'll see. Let's do it randomly to start with. So we roll the dice, and oh look, perfect. So we have achieved a double 5. Now, because I have no reserved cards, I can't do anything more than that. I've got a double 5. That's my roll. If my opponent gets a double, but it's less than a double 5, then that's called a normal hit, and the barbarians will lose 1 piece. If they roll a double 6, I will lose 1 piece. If we both roll a double 5, it's a tie. Nobody will lose a piece. However, if one of us rolls a triple against a double, or a triple against a single, is what is called a devastating blow, and the opponent loses 2 pieces. So let us just grab the barbarian dice, and we'll roll these, and I'll show how the hopefully we'll show how the reserve cards were. Good roll. So the barbarians have rolled a double 3. So as I said earlier, at this point the barbarians would lose their horde. The horde would die, so they'd lost a battle. But we don't want to do that, so we're going to play our reserve card, and this allows us a number of re-rolls equal to the number of CP points. Now, a re-roll is basically we can re-roll as many of these as we like. So we could just re-roll all 3 dice and hope to get a better double or a triple, just raw. But what we could do is we could say, well, let's hope we can roll another 3, because if we roll 3 3s, we will get a devastating blow, and we'll take 2 of their blokes off. So let's do that. So we roll, and we get a 5, so we failed. So let's try that again, and we roll again, and we get a 2, so we failed. So we would now lose that piece, and that's the end of the battle. The battles go on until only 1 person remains in the area. If we had rolled a 3, let's fiddle it, then the Ming would lose those 2 troops back to supply, and we would now be left with 1 on 1, and we have another round of combat. So the Ming are still the attackers, so the Ming would roll. I might be wrong there. Do we swap attackers? I can't remember now. I think we swap attackers. I'm just going to have to check. It's my game. I designed it. I can't remember the answer. When we battle continues at step A, yeah, the attacker still rolls. This is because I was remembering the Cousins War when you swap, but here the active player is always the attacker in this game. So the Ming continue to be the attackers. But then, of course, if we had a second round, nobody's got any reserved cards, so it would just be straight 3 dice rolls. So that's how the battles work. So let's just shove them out of the way a bit. Shove them out of the way. Oh, actually, I'm going to use this for illustrating Voyages as well. Right. There is one other thing that the Ming can do, that the barbarian overlords can do, which the Ming cannot do. Now, when the barbarians reserve a card on their turn, they flip it over, and if you reserve a card, your opponent can't use the action. The barbarians can choose to use their reserved card to strengthen any of their activities. So we've got a 2 CP here. So if on the barbarians' turn they play a 2 CP card to get some hordes, and we decide to stick some hordes in here. Let's get rid of that one. We decide to stick some hordes in the Western Mongol area. We could play this and discard it, and we get another 2 hordes. So obviously that's just an example, but if we had a 3 card and we had reserved another 3 card, we could actually put 6 hordes, and we could put them anywhere we like in the homelands. So we could actually in one turn get 6 hordes into play. We could also, or alternatively rather, attack with up to 6 hordes in one battle by using a reserve card. So that's a really strong play for the barbarian overlord player, and it's something that a Ming always have to look out for. Suddenly you can have a proper horde attacking your borderlands with those reserve cards. Okay, so that's reserving. I would have to say that that particular mechanism, which was the extra usage for the barbarians of their reserve card, was a fairly late addition to the game. When we were nearing the end of development, we got some really good feedback from playtesters that the barbarian overlord player, it was a fairly consistent but fairly flat operation. It was hammering continually against the borderlands, and there wasn't enough critical situations that would arise. So we decided that this extra activity for the using of the reserve cards would strengthen that barbarian play. The barbarians can actually play cards. I'm not sure if we've got one here. I don't think I've got one. You can play cards which can disrupt not just the Ming troops, but also can take gold out of China, and can take junks out of the South China Sea. But this extra reserve activity of the Ming gives you a lot more flexibility about what you're going to do with your reserve cards. You've got that choice. Do I save the reserve card for combat and get rerolls, or do I use that card for literally strengthening the original action I was going to do? Okay, I haven't covered Voyages. We need to do that. I'm happy to take questions if anybody's got any questions in the chat. Right, how do we do a voyage? Well, let's take a new card. Let's actually presume that we've used a couple of Ming cards. It's a new turn, and we're going to draw. Oops, I'll put that in my hand by in error. Let's draw another couple of cards and flip them over. There we go. Oops. Right, so we've got a couple of new cards. We've got a 1, and we've got another 3. So, as the Ming player, what we're trying to do is seed cards to the barbarian player that might give us the possibility of using these actions. So, for example, this card here, which is a 5 event, we could use that if they play it. So, if we're later in the game and we've got a couple of extra, let's just give ourselves a couple of extra. Well, that's not very good. Let's have number 1, a couple of extra voyages that we've miraculously completed. So, if we're in this situation, what we want to do is we want to give the barbarians, this card, which is a 1, this, which is a 5, and this one, which is a 1. So we want to play a card, but not one of these 3. So let's use let's use this card. It illustrates another point. So we're going to use this 2CP card. Note there is a barbarian action. So the barbarian will get this action whether we play it for the event or for the CPs. Whatever we do with it, they will get this action. However, we can choose when they get it. The action is the Ming Empire loses a gold from their homeland back to the supply. Now, we can force the barbarian to use that either before our action or after our action. Now, we're going to do a voyage, so let's spend the gold for the voyage so that we won't actually lose any. Okay, so, in fact, to make it a bit less obvious, let's give ourselves slightly fewer junks, because otherwise it's a bit too easy. Right, so I'm going to aim for the Persian Gulf. Now, to do a voyage action, you put the junks. You have to lose at least one junk and at least one gold, and you can use up to all of it, or you can save gold. The gold, if you succeed, will be used up. The junks, you'll only effectively lose the one that sits on the location. We're going to go for the Persian Gulf, and to succeed, we have to roll this many dice, and we have to get one of them, at least one of them, less than the amount of wooden pieces we've committed to this voyage. So in this case, it's a 2CP voyage, so we're going to get 2 dice, and we have to get less than 6. So it's not equal to, it's less than the number of wood. So we've easily succeeded. Of course, if we'd rolled a double 6, we would have failed. So we succeeded, so we put one of these guys on here. The other one goes back to the South China Sea, and all that gold is used up and goes back to supply. So, and then we say to the barbarian player, you can now use your action, and we don't lose any gold because we've used it all. Of course, we have still used it all, so we could have succeeded with those dice rolls using much less gold, but at least we had a good chance of doing it. So those are the kinds of decisions that you have to do. Right. So we've achieved 3. When we achieve 4, and this was another key design decision. When we achieve 4 voyages or more, there are some of these cards which get slightly, as we've seen here, slightly worse for the Ming Emperor. So in this particular case, if we've only done 1 to 3 voyages, the barbarians lose up to 2 settlements back to his English homeland. In the 4 to 6, it's only 1 settlement. I haven't explained settlements actually, have I? I probably ought to just mention those. If we go back to here, it's very straightforward. One of the actions that the barbarians can take with their CPs is to put settlement markers into their own homelands. So, for example, we might have chosen a 2CP card and put 2 settlement markers into a homeland, and then subsequently we can build those settlements in a province that we control. So if we've taken Yunnan, we could then spend CPs to put settlement markers into Yunnan. Now, what settlement markers do is they help the barbarians in combat. So they're effectively fortified camps. So if the Ming get a devastating blow against us in Yunnan, we would lose a settlement marker, not any hordes. If they get a normal hit and we've got a settlement marker there, we just ignore it. So that's really helpful. So one thing the barbarian players would like to be able to do is to pile in and put settlement markers into provinces that they control. The trouble is there's always that pressure of time, because you have to take all 5 of these to get a major victory within the time limit, which is basically going through the pack twice. So very often you haven't got time to do everything you want to do. Obviously, it's that kind of game. Sometimes you have to just risk it and go without settlement markers. Also, there are decisions you have to make. You've only got 5, so you have to decide where you want those settlement markers to be. So, for example, if a card says put 3 settlement markers into one of your homelands, if you put if you put 3 into, say, Eastern Mongols, it means that the Eastern Mongols area can only go into here, here, and here. So you wouldn't be able to deploy from here a settlement marker into Yunnan or into Liaodong. So you have to choose. So if you put all your settlement markers on one side, you're not going to be able to use them on the other side. So those are decisions you have to make. All right. So that is a brief look at how the game works. Now, also one of the late decisions that we made in development as a result of playtesting with the 2-player game was we felt that because it's asymmetric, it's fairer for both players if you play 2 games. So you play one game as the Ming Emperor and one game as the Barbarian, swap sides, and then you compare your level of victory, and you can see who came out best over a match of 2 games. And the rule book explains exactly how that works. So that was a nice late decision we made for the 2-player game. So I think, unless there are any questions, that's the conclusion of my overview of the game of Ming Voyages.